For decades, if you heard whispers of invisible submarines that could stay underwater for months, never surfacing, never refueling, outlasting any diesel boat by 1,000 miles, you might have thought it was science fiction or Soviet propaganda. But it wasn't aliens, it wasn't luck. It was the iron will of one man, Hyman George Rickover. He was the father of the nuclear navy, a short, intense Jewish immigrant from Poland who arrived in America as a child, fought through poverty, anti-Semitism, and a navy that didn't want him, to build the impossible. The world's first nuclear-powered submarine, the USS Nautilus, a vessel that changed naval warfare forever. In the Cold War, when the Soviets were building missiles and bombers, Rickover gave America the ultimate hidden fist beneath the waves. Submarines that could hide for weeks, strike from anywhere, and never run out of air or fuel. He didn't just build a boat, he built a new era. Hyman Rickover was born on January 27, 1900, in Mako Mazowiecki, a small town in Russian Poland. His real name was Chaim Godalia Rickover. His father was a poor tailor. His mother kept the family together through pogroms and fear. In 1905, when Hyman was 5 years old, the family fled the violence. They landed in New York, then moved west to Chicago. There, in the tough immigrant neighborhoods, young Hyman delivered telegrams, worked odd jobs, and helped support the family from the age of 9. He was brilliant but poor. College was out of the question, but Hyman dreamed bigger. He graduated from John Marshall High School with honors in February 1918. Through a family friend, he met Congressman Adolph Sabath, another Jewish immigrant who saw potential in the skinny, determined kid. Sabath nominated him for the United States Naval Academy. In an era when Jews were rare and often unwelcome in the military elite, Rickover got his chance. At Annapolis, he was bookish, studious, and relentless. He endured the usual hazing. He endured extra because of his heritage, but he never complained. He graduated 107th in a class of 540 in June 1922. Commissioned as an ensign, he began a career that would span 13 presidents and 63 years of service, the longest in American naval history. But the real fight was just beginning. The Navy was a club. Rickover was an outsider. He was short, he was Jewish. He was brilliant in ways that made others uncomfortable. Most officers played the game, climbed the ladder, avoided waves. Rickover smashed through them. Do you think the bureaucracy today still kills innovation? Let me know in the comments. Because for Rickover, the battle against red tape was as fierce as any war at sea. Block 2. Rickover's early career looked ordinary on paper. He served on destroyers, battleships, and even a minesweeper. He earned a master's degree in electrical engineering from Columbia University in 1929. But behind the promotions was a man who questioned everything. He hated waste. He hated incompetence. He hated the way the Navy rewarded politics over performance. In the 1930s, he was assigned to the Bureau of Engineering in Washington. There he saw the rot firsthand. Bloated contracts, lazy officers, outdated technology. He started writing blistering memos. He recommended changes that stepped on toes. Senior officers called him insubordinate. They tried to sideline him. One admiral reportedly said, "Rickover will never make captain if I have anything to say about it." But Rickover had a gift for survival. He also had allies. In 1941, he was sent to Pearl Harbor as an engineering inspector. When the Japanese attacked on December 7, 1941, Rickover was there. He worked around the clock repairing damaged ships under blackout conditions. His performance earned him the Legion of Merit, a rare honor for an engineer. The war pushed him further. He commanded a ship repair facility in Okinawa. He turned chaos into efficiency. He demanded perfection from his men and from himself. He was promoted to captain in 1946, but the promotion was grudging. the Navy still saw him as trouble. Then came the moment that would define his life. In 1946, the Navy was experimenting with nuclear power. The Manhattan Project had ended. The atom bomb was born. Now the question was, could the same power drive a ship? The idea had been floating around since the 1930s, but no one had the courage or the stubbornness to make it real. The Navy formed a committee. They studied, they debated, they wrote reports. Nothing happened. Rickover read the reports and saw the same old excuses. Too expensive, too dangerous, too complicated. He went straight to the top. He met with Admiral Chester Nimitz, the hero of the Pacific. Nimitz listened. Nimitz believed. In 1947, Rickover was named director of the newly created Naval Reactors branch. He was given almost no staff, no budget, and a mandate to build the impossible. He knew he had one shot. If he failed, nuclear power at sea would die for a generation. If he succeeded, the world would change. He started by recruiting. He didn't want yes men. He wanted the best minds, physicists, engineers, metallurgists, people who could think beyond the textbook. He poached talent from Oak Ridge, from General Electric, from Westinghouse. He worked them mercilessly. He read every document. He questioned every calculation. He slept 4 hours a night. The first big fight was with the Atomic Energy Commission. The AEC controlled all nuclear material. They saw the Navy as amateurs. Rickover saw them as bureaucrats. He bullied, he negotiated, he threatened to go public. He won. The Navy got its reactor program. But the real enemy was time. The Soviets were racing ahead. Stalin had the bomb. They were building submarines. America needed a nuclear submarine before the enemy did. Rickover set an impossible deadline. The first nuclear submarine would be launched in less than 7 years. Everyone said it couldn't be done. Rickover said, "Watch me." Have you ever seen a man so determined that he bends reality around him? That was Rickover in the late 1940s. A Jewish immigrant from a Polish shtetl, now holding the future of the free world in his hands. The challenge was insane. Nuclear power on land was barely proven. The reactors at Hanford and Oak Ridge were huge, guarded by armies of scientists, and still leaked radiation. Now Rickover wanted to shrink one down, stuff it inside a steel tube the size of a football field, surround it with sailors, and send it beneath the ocean for months at a time. The temperature would reach hundreds of degrees. The pressure would crush ordinary metal. One mistake and the entire crew would be cooked or poisoned. Rickover called it Project Nautilus. He picked the design himself, a pressurized water reactor. Water would be heated by the uranium core, turn to steam without boiling, drive turbines, spin propellers. Simple in theory, hell in practice. He fought 3 battles at once. First, the technical war. Materials didn't exist that could withstand neutron bombardment, high heat, and saltwater corrosion for years. Rickover's team invented new alloys, zirconium cladding for fuel rods, special stainless steels. They tested everything to destruction. He demanded prototypes of every component. If it failed once, it was scrapped. Second, the bureaucratic war. The Navy wanted conventional submarines with nuclear engines as an afterthought. Rickover said no. The boat had to be built around the reactor. The hull had to be shaped for speed underwater, not on the surface. He won. The Nautilus would be the first true submarine, not a submersible boat, but a vessel born to live underwater. Third, the political war. Congress was skeptical. The Atomic Energy Commission dragged its feet. Admirals whispered that Rickover was crazy, dangerous, power-mad. He responded by working harder. He moved his family to a small house near the West Milton reactor site in New York. He worked 7 days a week. He personally interviewed every officer who wanted to serve on Nautilus. He rejected most. He wanted believers, not careerists. In 1951, construction began at the Electric Boat Shipyard in Groton, Connecticut. The keel was laid on June 14, 1952. President Truman himself attended the ceremony, a rare public moment for a man who preferred shadows. But problems piled up. Welding defects, pump failures, radiation shielding too heavy. Rickover was everywhere. He flew between Groton, Idaho Falls, Schenectady. He screamed at contractors. He praised when praise was earned. He fired people on the spot if they cut corners. One engineer later said, "Rickover didn't manage people. He terrorized them into excellence." By 1953, the reactor prototype, called the Mark I, was running at the National Reactor Testing Station in Idaho. It was the size of a small house, but it worked. It generated steam. It proved the concept. Rickover stood in the control room, watching the gauges, and for once, he smiled. The pressure was crushing. The Soviets had launched their first nuclear submarine program. Intelligence reports said they were close. America could not afford to lose this race. Rickover knew it. He pushed harder. On January 17, 1955, the USS Nautilus was ready for sea trials. Commander Eugene P. Wilkinson took her out into Long Island Sound. The order came over the 1MC loudspeaker: "Underway on nuclear power." Those 5 words changed naval history. The Nautilus slipped beneath the waves and stayed there. No snorkel, no surfacing for air. She cruised at speeds no diesel sub could dream of, over 20 knots submerged. She could go weeks without refueling. The crew could breathe clean air recycled by machines. They were no longer limited by batteries or oxygen. The world didn't know it yet, but the age of the nuclear submarine had begun. And one stubborn immigrant from Poland had dragged the United States into it, kicking and screaming. The Nautilus was more than a submarine. It was a statement, a floating proof that American engineering could do what others only dreamed. But Rickover wasn't satisfied with one success. He knew the Soviets wouldn't stop. He pushed for more. In 1955, while Nautilus was still making headlines, Rickover was already designing the next generation. The Nautilus had used a reactor prototype called the Mark I. Now he wanted a smaller, more powerful reactor for attack submarines, boats that could hunt and kill enemy vessels. He called the program the Seawolf class, but the reactor was the real star, the sodium-cooled Mark II. Sodium was daring. Liquid sodium transfers heat better than water. It allows higher temperatures, more power, less size. But sodium reacts violently with water. One leak and you have fire, explosion, radiation. The Navy was terrified. Rickover said risk is the price of progress. He built the prototype at West Milton. It ran. It produced steam. But leaks appeared. Fires broke out during testing. Engineers died in accidents. Rickover mourned them, then doubled down. He ordered redesigns. He personally oversaw every weld. He made the program safer through sheer force of will. Meanwhile, the Nautilus proved her worth in ways no one expected. In 1957, under Commander Wilkinson again, she made the first under-ice transit of the North Pole. On August 3, 1958, the Nautilus reached 90 degrees north, the top of the world, completely submerged. No diesel boat could have done it. The crew celebrated with cake baked in the galley. Rickover received the news by secure message. He allowed himself a rare grin. But the real game changer came next. Rickover knew attack boats were good, but the future was in deterrence. ballistic missile submarines, boats that could hide for months, carry nuclear missiles, and guarantee a second strike if war ever came. Mutually assured destruction made real by American ingenuity. He launched Project Polaris. The missile would be solid-fueled, launched from underwater. The submarine would be larger, quieter, deeper diving. The reactor would be even more advanced. The S-5W, a pressurized water design that became the standard for decades. Construction began on the USS George Washington in 1957. She was commissioned in December 1959. On November 15, 1960, she launched her first Polaris missile from underwater off Cape Canaveral. The missile soared into the sky, carrying a dummy warhead. Success. The George Washington class carried 16 Polaris missiles, each with a range of over 1,200 miles. They could strike the Soviet heartland from the safety of the Atlantic or Pacific. The Soviets had nothing comparable. Rickover had given America the ultimate insurance policy. He was promoted to Vice Admiral in 1958, then Full Admiral in 1964. But promotions never softened him. He still interviewed every prospective nuclear officer personally. The infamous Rickover interview became legend. He asked brutal questions. He stared into souls. He rejected men who were brilliant on paper but weak in character. He wanted officers who would never compromise safety, never cut corners, never lie. One candidate later recalled, "He asked me why I wanted to be in the nuclear navy. I gave a patriotic answer. He said, 'That's bullshit. Tell me the truth.' I told him I wanted to serve on the most powerful ships in history. He nodded. That's better." Rickover didn't just build reactors. He built a culture, a cult of excellence, a navy within the navy. The nuclear propulsion program became the gold standard. Every mistake was dissected, every success studied. He created schools, training programs, quality control systems that are still in use today. But the cost was high. He burned people out. He made enemies. Admirals hated him. Contractors feared him. Yet no one could deny the results. By the time he reached mandatory retirement age in 1964, he had built a fleet of nuclear submarines that kept the peace through terror. The Navy tried to retire him. Rickover refused. He went to Congress. He testified. He shamed them. Congress passed special legislation to keep him on active duty. He served until 1982, 36 years past normal retirement. One stubborn man had bent the entire United States Navy to his vision. Rickover's power grew, but so did the enemy's. By the 1960s, he was the most feared man in the Pentagon. Admirals called him the kindly old gentleman behind his back, sarcasm dripping from every word. Contractors whispered that he was impossible to please. Yet every nuclear submarine that put to sea carried his DNA. Every reactor officer had survived his interview. Every weld had been inspected to his standards. He turned the nuclear navy into a meritocracy in a service built on tradition and rank. He promoted men based on brains and guts, not connections. He created a pipeline of talent that produced future chiefs of naval operations. He insisted on safety above all. In the nuclear navy, he said, we do not have accidents. We have incidents that become accidents because someone screwed up. His zero-tolerance policy saved lives for decades. But the man was human. He had a family. His wife Ruth stood by him through the long nights and endless travel. His adopted son Robert became a doctor. Rickover rarely spoke of personal life. Work was life. When asked about hobbies, he snapped, "I don't have hobbies. I have work." In the 1970s, the Cold War heated up again. The Soviets built the Typhoon class, massive missile boats larger than any American design. Rickover responded with the Ohio class, bigger, quieter, more missiles. Each carried 24 Trident missiles with multiple warheads. They could stay submerged for 90 days. They became the backbone of America's nuclear triad. He fought for every inch. When the Navy wanted to cut corners on sound quieting, he threatened to resign. When Congress questioned the cost, he testified with charts and fury. "We are not building boats for parades," he told them. "We are building them to survive and win." His health began to fail in the late 1970s. Heart problems, hearing loss. But he refused to slow down. He still worked 12-hour days. He still grilled young officers. In 1981, the Navy again tried to force retirement. Rickover, now 81 years old, went to Capitol Hill. He sat before the Senate Armed Services Committee and spoke plainly. "I have given my life to this Navy," he said. "If you want to retire me, do it. But know what you are retiring: a man who built the most powerful fleet the world has ever seen." The senators listened. They passed a special bill allowing him to stay until 1982. On January 31, 1982, Admiral Hyman G. Rickover was ceremonially retired after 63 years of service. President Reagan presented him with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Rickover accepted it quietly. Then he walked out of the Pentagon for the last time. He lived another 7 years in quiet retirement near Arlington, Virginia. He read, he wrote letters, he watched the Navy he built continue without him. On July 8, 1986, at the age of 86, Hyman Rickover died of complications from a stroke. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. The man who hated ceremony finally received it. Today, every nuclear-powered vessel in the United States Navy traces its lineage to Rickover's vision. The Virginia-class attack submarines, the Columbia-class ballistic missile boats, the Ford-class carriers with nuclear reactors. They all carry the lessons he drilled into his people: excellence, safety, integrity, relentless improvement. He was not beloved, he was respected, feared, admired. The immigrant boy from Poland who spoke with a thick accent, who fought prejudice and bureaucracy, who refused to accept impossible as an answer. He didn't just build submarines. He built the shield that kept the Cold War cold. He gave America the power to hide, to strike, to survive. And he did it one furious memo, one brutal interview, one perfect weld at a time. Hyman Rickover left behind more than submarines. He left a legacy carved in steel, uranium, and unyielding standards. The nuclear navy he built didn't just win the Cold War, it prevented it from turning hot. For 35 years, American ballistic missile submarines patrolled silently, carrying enough firepower to end civilization, yet never fired in anger. That silence was Rickover's greatest victory. Critics called him a tyrant, a micromanager, a paranoid perfectionist. They were right. But without that paranoia, there would have been accidents. Without that micromanagement, there would have been shortcuts. Without that tyranny, the United States might have lost the underwater race to the Soviets. History doesn't remember the nice guys. It remembers the ones who delivered. He changed the Navy forever. Before Rickover, submarines were surface ships that could dive. After him, they were true underwater machines. Faster, deeper, quieter, deadlier. The principles he established, rigorous training, obsessive quality control, personal accountability, still define the nuclear propulsion program. Every reactor operator today trains in simulators that trace their design back to his insistence on realism. Rickover's influence reached beyond the sea. His approach inspired civilian nuclear power plants. His fight against bureaucracy became a case study in how one determined individual can force change on a massive organization. Presidents listened to him. Congress protected him. Even his enemies admitted, when Rickover said something was possible, it usually was. In his final years, he reflected rarely on glory. He spoke instead of responsibility. "The devil is in the details," he often said. "Ignore them and people die." He lived those words. He demanded them from others. And because he did, thousands of sailors came home safe from patrols that lasted months beneath the ice. If you stand on the deck of a modern Virginia-class submarine today, or walk through the engineering spaces of an Ohio replacement, you feel his presence. The quiet hum of the reactor, the clean lines of the piping, the absence of rust, of sloppiness, of compromise. That's Rickover. He was not a warm man. He was not easy to love, but he was easy to respect. A poor Jewish boy who fled pogroms, crossed an ocean, fought his way into the most exclusive club in America, and then remade that club in his image. He proved that one mind, armed with knowledge, courage, and refusal to bend, can shift the balance of power on the planet. He didn't build weapons for war, he built them for peace. The kind of peace that comes when your enemy knows you can always answer from anywhere, at any time, without warning. Today, when a Trident submarine slips out of Kings Bay or Bangor, when its hatches close and it vanishes beneath the waves, it carries the echo of a single sentence spoken in 1955. Underway on nuclear power. Those words were not just a milestone, they were a promise kept for generations by the man who made them possible. Hyman George Rickover didn't just father the nuclear navy, he fathered the future of American sea power. And in doing so, he ensured that freedom would always have a silent guardian beneath the oceans. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, if it reminded you why stubbornness and excellence still matter, hit that like button, subscribe for more tales of the engineers who built the impossible, and tell me in the comments, who should we cover next? A pilot? A tank designer? A code breaker? Until then, stay curious, stay relentless, and remember, impossible is just another word for someone else's limit.